was, let's see, when is that?
11.
Yeah, October 11th. Again, thanks while we get the agenda open here. So is there a motion for approval of the minutes? I see Councilmember Clark with the motion, seconded by Councilmember Edens. Is there any question or comments on the motion? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone oppose or abstain?
Abstain.
We have 2 abstentions, so the minutes are approved. And then we will move now to our next part of our agenda, which is public participation. Again, we welcome public participation and great to have several folks here in the room. So Carla, you have some cards that folks that would like to speak?
I do. The first speaker is Michelle Patterson.
Yeah, just a friendly reminder, public comment is always limited to just 5 minutes. Thank you.
There you go. Sorry.
Great. You'll be discussing contract bids on the crosswalk improvements on Strecker Road. Very personal to me. I live right off of Strecker Road, so I want to thank you for that consideration. I also want to bring to your attention another matter related to Strecker Road. So perhaps this may be new to you, but it's something that's been pretty personal to me over the last 15 years that I've lived right off of Strecker Road. There's a part of the road where there is absolutely no sidewalk. That's between Englebrook and the Ellisville County line or city line. There's grass there. This is a known issue. Several years ago, I came to this room and there were placards of potential development to put a sidewalk there. There's no sidewalk, but people still walk there. They walk in the road. They push their babies through the grassy area. It's muddy, it's dirty, it's unsafe. I'm afraid if someone is to get hurt on that road, suddenly we will get a sidewalk. It is a safety issue. I walk on that road all the time. My husband walks on it twice a day, and you take your life in your hands or you walk into the rocks, into the grass, trip, turn your ankle. So I ask you to consider that part of the road as an organization, and we need a sidewalk there for safety. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Carla, what, do you have a card for next speaker?
I do. The next speaker is Don Wenkel.
Thank you all for your time this evening. Don Winkle, 224 Strecker Farms Court. I've been a Wildwood resident since before there was a Wildwood, I think July of 1995. And I'm here for the same reason, because we've been waiting patiently for over 20 years for a sidewalk on Strecker Road between Englebrook and the Ellisville city line. It's roughly 100 to 150 yards of probably the most dangerous walking area in the entire city of Wildwood. If you ever go by there, there's a line on the side of the road that has about maybe a 2-foot shoulder on both sides. And frankly, that's where everybody walks. And you walk against traffic so that you can see the cars coming at you. But while you're doing that, you're just hoping that nobody who's driving that car gets distracted or has a medical emergency while they're driving or whatever, because if anything like that would ever happen, they're going to hit you. And you're going to be lucky to get out of something like that with your life. And frankly, this is very frustrating and somewhat ridiculous that just because Wildwood has been lucky enough for the last 20 plus years to not have anyone have been hurt on this area, that it still evidently can't rise to the level of action. And so I would just ask you all to strongly consider not only the crosswalk that you're talking about this evening, but the future action that would make sure that there is a safe walking route along Strecker Road between Engelbrook and the Ellisville city line. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Carla, is there another speaker?
Third speaker is Roger Wackerl. Sorry.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to address the committee tonight. My name is Roger Wackerly. I live in Ward 2, and I'd like to share the following email and attachment I sent on February the 4th, 2022, over 8 months ago. Can we put this on the overhead, please? Okay, that's fine. I'll pass out a picture. That email over 8 months ago. I'd like to read that email, and I apologize. I'm going to go right up at 5 minutes tonight. Honorable Mayor Bolin, Wildwood City Council, Mr. Rick Brown. At yesterday's coffee with the mayor, I voiced my concern that I and several others were getting very frustrated and, quite frankly, agitated at the progress of the Strecker sidewalk. This stretch of sidewalk has been 20 plus years in the making, but more recently was reintroduced by Councilman Ray Matten back in 2017 at my request. Sadly, since his passing, this project has all but pretty much died. Not sure why it has come to such a standstill after gaining so much traction, but I'm guessing a lot has to do with the ridiculous attempt by the city of Wildwood to place a special circumstance overlay district on several properties. Something I and many others strongly oppose, and ask for your support at the appropriate time to vote this down. There is a serious public safety issue along Strecker Road, and it's not contaminated soil. As I've repeatedly said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we have a serious incident. Enclosed is one of many pictures that speaks volumes for itself to substantiate my concerns. Mr. Brown, I have emails from you that very much conflict with the information I received from you and others over the last week. Would you please send me an accurate and up-to-date list on the action items, including easement acquisition, right-of-ways, letters, contractors, etc., that are outstanding that prevent the completion of this project? I'll be honest in saying I'm disappointed in all my representatives at the pace and, quite frankly, the lack of attention this project has received. Several of my neighbors, including my family, campaigned very hard for many of you. And now we feel as though we are no longer being represented or heard. Since 2017, the city of Wildwood was able to obtain easement rights and the construction of numerous roundabouts, road work, bridge work, parks, and many other accomplishments, but we still can't lay down less than 2,500 feet of sidewalk. We can do better. Roger Wackerly. What really infuriates me is out of 16 council members and the mayor of Wildwood, only 2 of you, and some of you were not on council at the time, this is not directed to you, only 2 of you had the dignity and respect to respond to my concerns. 5 years ago, Public Works Department said that easement acquisition letters should go out in the fall of 2017. I've made multiple inquiries over the last 3 years as to when we can expect the utility acquisitions to be submitted. As of today, I still don't have an answer. During the coffee with the mayor earlier this year, the homeowner, and I'll leave their address out of this, at XXX Strecker Road, made the statement, "No one has approached us about a sidewalk or property or any other easement acquisitions." My takeaway from all of this, the city simply doesn't care, or you don't think there's a real public safety issue along Strecker Road. 365 days a year, we have families with small children, students walking to the bus stop, the elderly out for a walk, all of them having to walk in the street, dodging cars driven by young, inexperienced high school students, deer in the vicinity, drivers on the phone and not paying attention, and more importantly, speeding along Strecker Road. My wife and I must walk this stretch every day to get to the sidewalks Ellisville and Wildwood installed a few years back. And I can tell you from a personal experience, it's a suicide mission.
Mr. Rackerly.
I have about less than a minute, please.
All right, less than a minute. Thanks.
As a retired commercial airline captain, having flown for one of the largest airlines in the world for almost 40 years, I'm not being braggadocious. I think that more than qualifies me to speak on the topic of speed, reaction time, and risk assessment. The distance between the girl on the bike and the vehicle is approximately 2 feet. Just driving the speed limit takes less than that fast, and we have a fatality. And when this happens, and I pray to God that it doesn't, you're all going to look at each other and you're going to ask yourselves, how did we let this happen? If you sense a level of anger and frustration and urgency concerning the Strecker Road project, you would be correct. We've been talking about it for 25 years. That's a long time to do nothing. And I realize this won't happen overnight. And honestly, I think we'll still be talking about it for another 25 years. Can we at least put some crushed gravel over the utility easement for now until the city and the affected homeowners can settle their differences? The cost of the materials is minimal. It's under $3,000. Folks, the clock is ticking. You have the power to get this done. I implore you to get this project moving before we have a tragedy.
Thank you, Mr. Rackerly.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Carla, do you have any more cards? All right, thank you. Since we have this item on the agenda for Strecker Road, if there isn't any objection here from the committee members, I would ask if we can just move that item to be the first item on the agenda to be considered of the folks that are here. Is there anyone that opposes that? All right, seeing that, then we'll go ahead and make that the first item here. And then we'll resume the agenda. So we'll start with the contractor bids for Strecker Road Crosswalk Improvement Project.
Thank you, Chair Garitano. Committee members, this item is on the agenda. We have talked about it previously, and it was requested by the committee that the department move forward with requesting contractor bids to install crosswalk lights at the 2 existing striped crosswalks on Strecker Road. In that regard, the department did finalize bid documents earlier this fall, and we requested and advertised bids publicly and opened them. We did receive recently 2 bids to install the rapid rectangular flashing beacons at the 2 crosswalks at Timber Ridge Estates and Englebrook Drive and Court. The low bid of the 2 received was from Gershner Electric. The amount was $35,980. Based on past experience bidding this type of work, we are comfortable that is a competitive bid. So essentially tonight, the department is recommending moving forward with award of a contract with Gershner Electric to install the rapid rectangular flashing beacons at the 2 crosswalks for the bid amount of $35,980, including another $5,000 for contingencies if necessary by the department. So that is the recommendation to the committee from the department tonight, and I'd be open for any questions.
Hey, Rick, before we open up, maybe just a clarifying question. Assuming that this gets approved tonight, what would be the time frame for something like this to get to the point of installation? Do you have any indication at this point from these contractors?
Well, the first step would be to take it to the full city council for approval. And as you know, we typically do 2 readings. So depending on whether we do that in one night or 2 meetings, they would receive notice to proceed immediately following council approval, whether that's December or January. But I would expect construction over the wintertime. I think I have a March 1st or an April 1st completion date in the contract. I have to double check that. I can look at that right now.
Thanks, Rick. All right, look to see if there are any questions or a motion for the approval of the department's recommendation or any other motion. Councilmember Edens,
Yes, I was very glad to see this on the agenda. I would like to make a motion to approve the bid for $35,980 with Gerstner Electric. And then once you have a second, I've got some questions and comments. Thank you.
okay, so we have a motion on the floor for the approval per the department's recommendation. I see Councilmember Jaxi had his hand up for a second. So we have the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion related to the motion? Okay, do you have a question about the motion?
Yeah, pertaining to the topic for approval, yes. Just as a friendly heads up, I will be pushing for a second reading at the next council meeting to proceed with all due haste. While this does have a fiscal note and it's not the smallest, it's certainly not the largest. And because this has been an issue that's been discussed for a number of years, I would certainly hope that my colleagues would be amenable to that. That being said, I just do want to clarify, if we do go ahead and get this approved at council in November, this will go on this fiscal year, correct? Because it was originally budgeted, or when we did mid-year adjustments, did we lose that ability to run it through on this fiscal year?
Councilmember Edens, that would be assuming we get a contract signed before the end of the year, it would be a 2022 expenditure. But we will need that contract executed before, and that way, even if the money isn't spent in 2022, at least we have an encumbrance then into 2023.
Okay,
So the contract is what will drive that decision.
that would be my preference, but I mean, it is certainly in the budget for next year, but we should proceed with all due haste, certainly if the weather gets worse. My other thought is in terms of the public safety issues that are tied into this crosswalk, and if there is not, I'll use the word immediate for lack of a better word, immediate movement on the rest of the project, which includes sidewalk expansion. Can we do?
Can you hold that for a second? Let's get the motion because it is related to the
Okay, all
crosswalk
right.
itself. And then I'll ask the city administrator to make any comment related to any update based on that. So yeah, if there's anything else, then we have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? Okay, the motion unanimously is approved. So I did want to, based on the comments that we had heard, I did want to have either city administrator or director of public works, or, to perhaps provide what was the latest update we had gotten when we had approached the property owner, or what was shared with the council the last time, just to make sure everyone is aware of where we are as a status.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My response is going to be very abbreviated. As you all know, there are legal issues related to putting in a sidewalk, and it doesn't matter if it's on the north side or the south side of Strecker Road. They both require some legal issues to be resolved prior to that. The conversation currently is that it might make more sense to put that sidewalk on the north side of Strecker Road for a number of reasons, but neither the option for the north side nor the south side can move forward until we resolve some legal issues. And that is the holdup. It's nothing more. It has nothing to do with cost or anything. It has to do with legal issues.
All right, Councilmember Edens, did you have a question?
Yes, in lieu of making tangible progress, can we make this a Keep Kids Alive speeding district? We just did this in another part of the city once it was reviewed by the police department and I believe the Board of Public Safety, which essentially doubles the fine for speeding in an area.
Councilmember Eden, my suggestion would be to take that to the Board of Public Safety. That is the body that typically reviews those, and have them weigh in on that decision. I'd be a little leery of doing that. Since this is a collector road, it's not a local residential street, which is where we typically install those zones where we have slower speed traffic. We shouldn't have kids playing in the middle of Strecker Road, frankly. So it's a little bit different situation.
Would it require significant cooperation with Ellisville? I mean, could we not just do our section of the road? We would. I mean,
No, I'm sorry, it wouldn't affect Ellisville. I'm just suggesting that it would be taken to the Board of Public Safety
Okay.
for their review.
Councilmember Knight.
Okay, is that better? Okay, sorry. Was the mention of putting some gravel or something on that utility area, is that a possibility? Would that be helpful? Are we even allowed to do that? Like what? I can't visualize where that would be and how much it would help, but
I think, Councilmember, the same legal issues come to play if we're constructing on private property that council or City Administrator Cross spoke to earlier. So I don't know that it would change whether it was gravel or concrete. The same things would apply.
All right. Well, I don't see any other hands up or any questions here, but I guess we'll move on. And certainly, you know, for folks that came to speak, if you have further discussion or questions, you can speak with either council members offline. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk with you more. All right, then we're going to resume the agenda, then back to the order that we had before. So we'll proceed. So under administration and under for information, we do have no items there. So the next item is the for action item regarding the city administrator search process. And there are a couple items that I had thought might qualify as a closed item. So we could, and I've asked the city attorney to review, and so I believe we could do that. No, not that I believe, I know we can do that. The city attorney did confirm that. So we can either wait to do that at the very end, you know, because we do have a Zoom and live, or we can do that now if the committee wishes to do that. Is there a preference? Move it to the end. Okay, so we'll do that then. All right, so then we'll move to the next item. So again, no objection if we then move that to the end. I don't see any objection here. So we'll move to the next item, which is the review of the sunshine request policy. And that is the policy on fees for council records request. So we have that there before us. And let me see, is there City Administrator Cross going to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We talked briefly about this. I think maybe not at the last meeting, but the meeting before. This is an agenda item that has been around for a long time. And it became an agenda item because of some abuses that were occurring in terms of records requests that were being made of the city staff, that fees were not being charged, but they were not for a particular subject matter that was being discussed at the council level or at the committee level. They were being, it appeared that the information was being obtained to then be passed on to private residents. And so this was brought to the admin PW committee to address, and things have changed, councils have changed. But you all will recall that I brought it to your attention a couple meetings ago and asked, did we still want to address it or not? And your response was, let's still address the issue of fees because you all may not be here and everything may be just fine now, but potentially there could be some similar abuses in the future. So therefore, the city attorney, John Young, and I worked on putting together this document that you have, waiving fees for requests for public records. I won't go through all of it. Hopefully you all have had a chance to review it, but it does state, I'll kind of paraphrase some of the more salient points of it, but fees will be charged to council members if, well, let me do the inverse of that. No fees are charged if a council member is making a request of a public document that is in the body as a whole, the council to discharge their duties and they need information to be able to do so. It's within your scope of responsibilities, therefore there would be no fee. If it is something that is needed outside of that scope, either for a committee level topic or a council level topic, that in that case, fees would be charged at the normal rate, which is typically X amount per copy for making copies, as well as an hourly rate at the lowest rate for the clerk who is obtaining that information. Fees can in fact be waived under certain circumstances, and this policy addresses that. And you all read in terms of what it takes, but it takes council action to actually waive that fee. And there are triggers in here when the city clerk gets that request, and if the city clerk determines that the request is made to waive the fees, but they shouldn't be, and that triggers certain things. So I'm going to leave it at that. I will defer to the city attorney who drafted this legislation if he wants to expand on that. But we're also happy to answer any questions. So with the chair's permission, I'll let John speak.
Just a couple of, first, pursuant to the Missouri Sunshine Law, it is the city council that has the authority to waive fees. As a body, the city council has never established a policy for waiving fees. So this will be the first time that that policy will be put into place to clarify clarify direction to the city clerk and administrative staff, how they should react and respond to records requests. Just to point out two examples of why this was brought up, is council members asking for basically information for political reasons, or for personal reasons, or for the intent to subvert the requirements of the Sunshine Law as it relates to anyone who makes a records request. I can point to 3 instances, and I won't go into them now, but I can talk to you offline if you'd like to hear them. As a general procedure, here's how I envision this. The general principle is you, as with anybody else, are subject to the Sunshine Law. And when a request is made, it will have to be responded to. The question just simply becomes are you going to be responsible for the fee? The city clerk will make a determination. I have made an effort to define and describe the basis. If it's related to an agenda item, and clearly so, absolutely. Now, to that extent, if a council member makes a request of the city clerk for information regarding an agenda item, and the city clerk says, clearly, yes, this should be provided and is relevant to your consideration, then it should be relevant and provided to all council members as well as the mayor. So if you make a request and the fee is waived, everybody gets it. That's the way the policy is currently drafted. If it is determined that it is not reasonably related to an agenda item and not in furtherance of your understanding of the city business, the city clerk will notify the council member of that, and the council member will have an opportunity then to appeal that decision to the city council as a body. And the city council will then vote on whether or not fees should be waived. I will point out that I have excluded the person who made the request from voting on that because it is their fees that are being waived. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Bertolini.
Yeah, thanks, John. I was reading and I think it's item 4 of waivers of fees. And it says that if a member of the council gets turned down, basically the clerk says, no, we can appeal that, but the city clerk will charge a fee. And they say on certain circumstances, by example, records that are inappropriate to include without a fee, but are limited to the following: requests for emails named by city officials, officers, and employees. Am I reading this correctly that the Sunshine Law doesn't automatically make emails a non-fee request? Is that right?
Well, so the idea here is if there's research time that's responsible, or if there's copying fees to be made, yes, we can charge fees for copies of emails. There's a recent case that says we can't charge research time anymore for emails. I think it's a poorly decided case, but unfortunately, that's not my decision to make. But the idea here is we've had instances of someone asking, I want to see any and all emails of this elected official. Had nothing to do with, no statement as to subject matter, just every and all. And that's the idea, is that if there are fees to be charged, they will be charged under that circumstance.
But we don't have the right to say under the sunshine law, we don't have the right as a body, as a council to say, no, you can't ask for emails unless it's very specific in terms of date, time, recipient, nothing like that. We
No,
can't do
we
that.
cannot do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Edens.
Okay, the one part that I'm a little bit confused about is the first whereas clause where you restated the ordinance as it exists. Because the way I read it, it almost sounds like the city will still provide it, but in person in the office for viewing. We just won't print you a copy unless you go through this. So there's still a way for people to, I don't know, sit in a room with a computer and see everything.
Not necessarily. So this language is modeled after statutory language for third-class cities, which a lot of these cities' older ordinances are.
Okay,
And you have to read that in conjunction with the sunshine law, because the sunshine law does not require you to make copies of the records. You just have to make the records available. So we still have to go through the sunshine law process, and fees can be charged consistent even with that provision.
so available can be in
Correct.
person, 9 to 5 is, okay. I thought it was really well written. I thought you and Mr. Cross did a good job with the direction on this. I remember when we had discussions about this, gosh, was that 2 years ago? Yeah, I don't know. It's like a time vacuum. And with COVID, 2018, 2019, something. Or I wasn't here 20. It would have been 2019. I think at the time, what I was really struggling with is what happens when there's always going to be something that's left to one or two people's interpretation. And what happens if that person in that role has some sort of overwhelming bias, or you've got a council that somehow has a majority of wackadoodles, let's say, that's in charge of that vote. And there's really no way to proof against that. You're always as good as the people that make up the body. And I think what I'm still worried about is, am I doing more good with this, or am I still creating some sort of level of harm? I can't get past this being a double-edged sword. I'm on the struggle bus. Might be driving it. Feel free to comment. Is there some, do you see what I mean? No. Okay. So maybe it's from previous experiences, right? So this is going to go through one or two people. So the clerk or the city administrator. And what happens if we don't have, Mr. Cross or Ms. Eldridge making good decisions and saying, yes, this is city business. What if that person in that office is biased or has other issues, and then it goes to a council made up of potentially nutters. I'm talking 10 years down the line, 5 years, 2 years down the line. I just can't get past the ability that somehow there's going to be one person in the minority that is trying to do their job well, somehow harmed by this.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I think I understand, Ms. Edens, where you're coming, Councilmember Edens, where
Yeah.
you're coming from. There is a level of trust, okay? And that's throughout the staff and at the city, okay? We hire people and put them to do a job, and you have to trust that they're going to do the job. My role as city administrator, if they're not doing their job, then we'll replace them. And same goes for you. If I'm not doing my job, you replace me, or I leave on my own, whichever the case may be. However, this ordinance that was drafted by John is pretty encompassing of all situations. And the key takeaway here is that this is about charging fees. We charge fees, okay? In all instances, certainly we do not waive fees for residents requesting, and we get requests all the time. We have a policy. We just don't waive fees to residents. Council is a little bit different, but I think it'll be pretty clear to the city clerk. And then if not clear to her, then the city administrator will step in and find out if this is, if somebody's trying to abuse or go around the policy or not. So Will that happen sometime? Anything's possible, but I think your concern is understandable, but I think it's a very small concern that there could be some collusion going on or something that would allow, and at the end of the day, it's just a matter of charging fees. So if somebody were to get some information that we didn't charge a fee, it's not the end of the world. There's, it's still a sunshine request, and it's just a matter of that. But there, we in office, particularly the city clerk and the city administrator, I mean, we have guidelines in terms of what we can release, be it a closed record or, information that we know for a fact should not be disseminated. So there's a level of trust. You just have to assume that we're doing what we need to do.
And if I may just add briefly, currently, there's no policy or direction at all, and it's been basically interpreted. I don't know where the practice started. It predates me, but it's being done on basically an ad hoc basis. So at least here, we've got some written policies and guidance as to what should be done.
I feel better. Thank you. I'm not fully there, but it's enough for a yes vote. So thank you. I'll sleep better tonight. It's just, takes all kinds of people to make up the world. And sometimes you get a lot of people at the same place at the same time that, can make it miserable for somebody else. So thank you.
All right. Councilmember Alina.
Yeah, Steve, I assume you're looking for a motion tonight to move this to council?
Yes, sir. I'd like a motion and a second, and then approval to move it to council. Yes, sir.
I would like to make that motion, Mr. Chair, is that the waiving fees for requests for public records as a new ordinance be submitted as drafted.
And so Councilmember Hopper got his hand up for a second there. So any question or discussion on the motion on the floor? All right, seeing none, then all those in favor of the motion here to approve this or is it ordinance?
I'm going to suggest as a policy be done with
Policy.
resolution.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Do I need to change the motion?
Or no, you-
mentioned, I said the word ordinance.
oh, Carla? Okay.
Sorry.
So a policy.
I think that the motion was just to present it to the city council for approval, and I'm going to recommend to the city council be done as a resolution.
Got it, as a resolution. All right. So you're good with that. Second, you're good with that. Carly, you've got that there. So all those in favor say aye. All right. Anyone opposed or abstain? Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to Public Works for information. The first item under for information is the Fall Tree Planting Project update. And there is an update presented there. So since it is a for information item, if your questions haven't been answered in the document there, we'll certainly entertain those and have Director Brown answer you.
I can certainly address any questions now or after the meeting if you have them relative to the information provided. I just wanted to give you a little bit more background on the tree planting project and our plans to move forward since the contract was awarded last night.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Edens.
This hanger looks great. I just wanted to commend the department. I really hope residents will read it, and maybe we can all do a better job when we talk to our residents at HOA meetings or in person of talking to them about tree care, because at the end of the day, it's taxpayer dollars.
Well, the tree hangers were developed in coordination with Davy Resource Group. They had recommended them. They used them elsewhere, so that's where they came from. But so we took hangers that they had previously utilized and tailored them to meet our needs. So that's what we're planning on placing on residents' doors after we plant a tree. So
That's great. All right, well, we'll move forward then. Thank you, Rick, for that for information update there on that. And now we've got a couple of 4 action items. So we'll start with the first item, which is the proposed temporary repairs to structure 3-107. Director Brown, all yours.
thank you, council members. Thank you, Chair Giartano. Bringing back an item on the agenda that you've been very familiar with. We've discussed at previous meetings this fall. As you know, Cochrane Engineering is working towards design of a new bridge structure at this location. That work is progressing with Cochrane. They are under contract to complete the final design for a new 62-foot span single span bridge at that location. Their contract gives them essentially to the end of December to complete the design plan. So that work is moving forward. We met with them yesterday over Zoom to talk about their current situation. They are moving forward with providing us easement documents that we can use to start attempting to acquire easements from the adjacent property owners. And then they're moving forward with permitting with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a 404 permit. We are in a situation where we are monitoring this structure very carefully, almost on a daily basis, because we are concerned. We have seen it move slightly, and that I think in the long term, it's just it's a question of when we close the road. If we don't do something in the short term, that's kind of where we're at right now. Very concerned about rain events and additional scour at the end of the structure. So we're monitoring it from that standpoint. But I wanted to provide an option to the committee for a temporary repair, something that would allow us to keep the road open and avoid the need to close the road. So we had met with Geotechnology previously, shown them the structure. They recommended a contractor called GSI. They are not a local contractor. They're a Midwest company. They do work in St. Louis. They're doing work here right now. So they are in the area. They just don't have a local presence. But this contracting outfit specializes in slope stability repairs, this kind of work that would be necessary to stabilize the wing wall on that essentially the northwest corner of the structure. So what we're trying to do is to provide a option to install soil nailing along the wing wall on the northwest corner of that bridge as a temporary repair that will allow us to keep the bridge, the road open to traffic rather than to close it. Right now, with Cochrane's progress, we are probably at best case 5 to 6 months out before we can start construction on a bridge. Given all the things that we have to do to get the easements acquired, to bid the project, to take it to council for approval, to get materials fabricated and shipped on site, likely you're looking at April 1st or May 1st, best case if we follow through with Cochrane's design. So what my fear is we have to close the road. We're going to have to close it soon, and that we're looking at an extended closure of that length of time, 5 to 6 months plus the construction time. Well, we can't avoid the construction time. It's going to be closed when we rebuild the bridge because that's going to be a requirement, unfortunately. But we do have some ability to install a temporary fix that would allow us to keep the road open until we have to close it for construction. So it would buy us time. So what I'm presenting to you is a proposal. It's not a final proposal yet, but it is a proposal, a pretty firm proposal from this contractor GSI to install soil nails to stabilize that northwest wing wall and provide a shotcrete wall in lieu of the current wing wall that's there. The cost that they are proposing is about $105,000. I'm going to mark that up to say maybe $115,000 to do the temporary repair. The contractor says they can do it in 5 working days. We would have to close the road for those 5 working days, no doubt, to allow them to do the work. What I wanted to point out to you is there is a road user cost. There is a cost to closing this road. People are inconvenienced. Their time is worth money, not to mention emergency services. So if we close the road, those emergency vehicles from Monarch are going to have to find a way around. And that detour is significant. And doing some quick calculations, I was kind of looking at it earlier today. It's on the order of 4 to 6 miles, depending on where you're at, additional travel time. If we close the road at this location. So what I'm suggesting is through the road user cost that will be incurred, not to mention the emergency concerns for the emergency of access, I believe there's a pretty strong argument to be made to spend the money to temporarily shore up the abutment so that we can keep the road in place. And that's why I went ahead and made the recommendation. Now, I would say these costs are not final. What the contractor said to me is or what I told them was, if this committee decides that it's in the city's interest to move forward, I would ask them to make a final proposal to us, which he indicated wouldn't be more or less than 5% of the $105,000. And then I would take that to the full city council for authorization to move forward as an emergency repair to keep the road open. That way we could minimize the amount of closure time. So there's a lot there to think about. Rockwood School District would be inconvenienced. They run buses for elementary, middle, and high school through that area as well. They could certainly reorganize their routes and address the closure, but certainly I think they would prefer that it not be closed as well. But frankly, I think the emergency services is probably my biggest concern, frankly. So with that, the recommendation was to move forward with this potential temporary repair to install the soil nail wall in shotcrete on the northwest corner of the bridge to allow us to keep the road open. If this recommendation is approved by this committee, we take it to the city council at their next meeting in November 14th for approval. So I think with that, I'll stop and allow you to ask any questions that you have.
I see Administrator Cross, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it would be helpful for this committee if Rick were to expand a little bit on the cost to replace that bridge in total. We've discussed that, so I think it's important to reiterate what that is going to cost, and also I think it would be helpful for the committee for Rick to give a guesstimate in terms of if we do this temporary at $110,000, $120,000, how long we think that will last and be able to keep us before we have to address $750,800 expenditure. If Rick could, I think it'd be helpful if Rick gave you some of those details.
Sure, absolutely. So the cost estimate, I believe that we received from Cochrane for the new bridge, the new 62-foot single span bridge, was on the order of just under $800,000. I want to say it was about $790,000. So it's a fairly pricey project. As opposed to the temporary fix would be around 115 thereabouts. As far as, I guess, what I feel like this would buy us time, I asked the contractor GSI to provide a repair that would allow us 5 years. Frankly, I don't feel comfortable saying that we would want to wait another 5 years. My recommendation would be to continue forward with the ultimate replacement project as we are currently doing, with the intent on building it next year. It's just this would allow us more time to get through that process. We wouldn't have to necessarily pull off the state parks. We could conceivably get an easement from the state parks, which would reduce the cost of our permanent project. One of the things that the contractor has told us, that Cochrane has told us, we have to get easements from the parks and then from the private property on the west. Cochrane says we can pull off of the park's property, but to do so, we have to redesign the bridge, essentially to lengthen the wing walls and potentially put in a retaining wall, or what we'd consider a drop structure in the channel. So those are additional construction costs. Plus, when they bid the project, the contractor would have to plan on not utilizing the state parks property to cross the creek. In other words, the bids are going to be higher if we rush this out the door and don't get an easement from state parks because we don't have a temporary solution. This buys us time so that we could negotiate with state parks. We could potentially get an easement, and that would cut some of the costs. So the idea would be on the back end, we could save this $100,000 by getting an easement from the parks. Because if we can't, and we have to rush the project out as fast as possible, we are going to spend a bit more on the construction of the project, if that makes sense. I know it's a lot to consider, but so I think there's a chance to recoup it on the back end with our bids, if we can get an easement from state parks on the east side of the road.
Okay, I see a couple of hands up, so I'm going to start with Councilmember Clark, then we'll go to Councilmember Nine. And then, oh, Councilmember Edens, I didn't see your hands. Go ahead, Councilmember Clark.
Okay, well, I do want to make a motion, but I had a couple of questions myself first. And first, I think that we should look at ourselves and not point fingers at someone else, because it seems that in 2019, Rick brought this before committee or someone with had done his due diligence in looking at this culvert, and it was quite a bit less of a replacement cost than it is now. So that plus now the repair are the temporary that cost involved, all of this stuff, instead of doing the going ahead with our preventative maintenance and letting the plan work as it should and keep things in order before they get this bad. I think it's just a lesson for us. And the user, the cost of the user, I think Rick's estimate was $1,000 a day and MoDOT's was $1,800 a day. So every day that we wait, it's going to cost us more. And of course, we'll have to wait till November, till the council meeting. But I had the same concern about how long would this last, this temporary? Will it last long enough to get to the replacement? And it sounds that it did. It will. But I think that was all my questions. But I would go ahead and move to request a final proposal from GSI to install a soil nail shotcrete wall along the northwest corner. And thank you for that picture. Kind of explained very well what the shotcrete wall was. Along the northwest corner of the structure of 3-107, not to exceed the $115,000, and to start work within the next week. In addition to the motion, the motion recognizes this is a temporary fix and only until the new bridge can be constructed as a permanent structure to start up no later than January 1 of 2023.
Okay, you have that motion on the floor. Is there a second for that motion? Councilmember Nine did have her hand. So I'll let Councilmember Nine second, and then you had a question. We're going to go to Edens and then anyone else that may have questions.
I have two questions now. One is just to clarify on the language of the motion, because you had a not to exceed for the bid amount, but then I believe Director Brown just said it might go up by another 5%.
He had mentioned at first that it was going to be like $105,000, and that 10% more would have been $115,000.
Okay, so it's already added into the motion. Thank you. I thank you for bringing this to the committee and the rest of the council, which I believe the committee is probably entirely in support of this, but public safety costs what it costs. And the way I see it is whether or not this turns out to be throwaway money or money that we recoup on the back end and are able to save with easement acquisition is negligible in the discussion. I cannot sleep with adding 4 miles to someone's emergency response vehicle time or slowing down transportation that's important for daily lives to save $100,000. So let's do this.
Councilmember Nine, you're next.
I just had a question on the temporary work that would be done first. Is any of that work contributing to the final phase? Like, is there some things that will be torn up or done that it's like won't have to be done later then? Or is all that money just going to the temporary and it has nothing to do with any kind of, digging or moving or whatever that will have to be done for the permanent bridge?
Unfortunately, no, it won't be it won't be usable or won't be something that would reduce construction costs for the permanent bridge. The best we could hope would be to allow us to buy time to acquire that easement from the parks, which would be preferable and would potentially reduce the bid costs.
Councilmember Jackson, you're next.
Rick, I would echo the thank you for bringing it. And then I have maybe a silly question that has always wondered this citizen. Just generically, when we do work like this, do we approach the contractor about picking times that are lower traffic volume times to close a road for 5 days to do this? Is that even a thing? Like working in over a weekend or something? I don't even know what. It just always amazes me when construction happens that it seems like it's at the peak time.
Well, certainly that can occur. And it's probably more apt to occur on higher volume state routes and larger projects. But, and we could do that here. Now where we typically try to do that is when we do the bridge projects, we prefer to do them over the summer months, when Rockwood doesn't have classes and they're not running buses. In fact, that's still a possibility here that if we can get through the easement acquisition quickly with state parks, perhaps we could do that here. Then we wouldn't be too concerned with that delay, because that might push it another month, say, but that would be preferable. But the temporary repair, they'll be out there for 5 days during the regular working hours of the day. So we wouldn't necessarily reopen it, I don't believe. I'll double check on that. My expectation is we wouldn't reopen the bridge or the road for those 5 days that they're working.
Well, and part of the reason I ask is assuming that there could always be a cost to that. If the city or if a municipality asks for the work to be done at night, then we're paying extra for night labor. If we ask for work to be done during a weekend, so as to maybe reduce typical commuter day traffic impact, that there's a cost. That's why.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, quick one, Rick. What's the estimated, when the actual construction of the bridge starts, what's the actual time of closure at that point?
So when we've done these bridges previously, we have tried to do them over the summer months, and typically we'll close them right after Labor Day. And we require that they open them up just before classes start, which is about the third week of August. So it's a little under 3 months, but we might be able to speed that up too.
Okay, so I'm worried about, and Tricia's motion was included some dates, and given what Rick has just said, do we need to change some of that? You had said something about starting on January 30th or something of that nature.
Well, I had, I would have to look back in the paperwork about the wording that he had, but it was that something, I don't know, I have to.
That's right. I didn't mean to send you into the files there, but maybe Rick can answer. How long, if I got my dates, how long will the temporary wall take 5 days to construct roughly?
Correct. So the temporary wall would take 5 days to construct, and the goal would be to start as soon as we have approval through the city council, frankly.
Okay.
And schedule that with the
And
contractor.
then once that's in place, we can keep the road open until the actual construction starts, which you're saying would probably be after Memorial Day. Okay, and run
correct.
probably through the summer, right?
Yeah, it's conditioned on getting the easements that we need from Babbler State Park and then from the
Got
private
it.
property on the
Okay.
west. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So if I could follow up here, that, so what date, I would like to say a date that we start by. If it's not January 1st, what date would you suggest? I just don't want to let this go. And then, in 2 years, we look back and go, ooh, we didn't start on the final.
Well, I was a little confused whether you're referring to the temporary or the final. I can't commit to the final project other than to say that we are continuing with the design, and the easement acquisition is we've contacted both property owners, so it's in progress. The temporary fix, the goal would be to do it as promptly as we can following council approval. The next council meeting is November 14th. We'd have to ask for 2 readings at that meeting. At least that'd be my expectation, so that we try to get this out and get it completed shortly thereafter, certainly by the first of the year, hopefully by December 1st, frankly. The ultimate project, I really can't commit to a firm date other than to say my recommendation was to continue full steam ahead with the plans and the right-of-way acquisition for that project, with the intent on starting it as soon as we can, not relying on the temporary fix to delay it for a matter of years or months beyond necessary. I just believe the condition of that structure is, we still have to acknowledge that it is an old structure and it's not in great shape. So as this deficiency appeared rather quickly, I'm not real comfortable just leaving it out there any longer than we need to.
Then I would change the motion, instead of by January 1st, start on the permanent, to make sure that we continue on with the process of changing over as soon as possible within 2023.
Okay, well, we do have a motion on the floor and it's already been seconded, but if the second is in agreement with that change and there's no objection at all from the council, then we can proceed. I'm seeing no objections there. Then we have that motion on the floor. Any other questions or discussion on the motion? All right, then seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you, Rick. All right, moving on to the next item, which is the proposed city consultant agreement with GBA.
Thank you, Chair Garitano, council members. This next item pertains to a request from the department to hire the consulting firm GBA to complete inspections of our culverts, our crossroad culvert structures on our roads in the city of Wildwood. This is something new. We started on this project a couple of years ago in 2020. And for budget reasons, we didn't do work on it in 2021, but we want to inspect all of our crossroad culverts on a 5-year basis. So we frankly don't know exactly how many we have, but the goal would be to get through them on a 5-year basis and have them inspected. So we haven't done all of them. This is essentially the second step of completing all of our culverts. So we did get a proposal from GBA. They had done the prior work in 2020, and they've also inspected our small bridge structures as well. So the recommendation is to enter into a contract with GBA to inspect about 100 crossroad structures, which we believe will be the remaining structures in the city, for the amount of $23,500. We would, if approved by the committee and the city council, we'd hope to complete this work hopefully by the end of the year, if not into January. And with that, I'll address any questions that you may have.
We see any questions or someone that would like to make a motion there? All right, Councilmember Hopper, I'm noticing your hand went up first. Is that for a motion?
Yes.
Okay, then Councilmember Clark, I'd seen your hand up. So is that a second? Okay. So any questions or discussion then on the motion to proceed with the department's recommendation? All right, Councilmember Joe Farmer.
So are we giving them a list of where these culverts are, or are we kind of letting them? I guess my question is, is there a possibility that they're going to find ones that we didn't know were there? And then assuming they do that, inspect those as well.
That's effectively what they are doing. So they're right, Dan. Dan will be out there with them, with Brendan, and basically you're traveling the roads, checking for culverts, and inspect them as you come across them. So because we really haven't done this formally before, so it'll be inventoried. We'll have a report, and then they'll pick up coordinates for GIS. So we'll have that information for our GIS system as well. So since we haven't done it before, that basically is what they're doing.
What you were going to suggest, we have a culvert scavenger hunt. You know, Department of Parks, Planning, they do a good scavenger hunt. We could have partnered with them. So, Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, just to reiterate what I said earlier about the preventative maintenance program, I think this is a great thing to do and to make sure that we don't get into a situation with another culvert that we have to shut down a road or we cause someone to be hurt.
All right, so then I don't see any other hands up. We do have that motion on the floor. You have one more question? Okay, again, pertain to the motion on the floor.
I think so. So in this report that we have, there's already, I guess, a handful of these that look like they need some fixes. I assume, are we budgeting to do those too, or are we going to wait till we get all the results back?
Well, the idea would be to follow up with the maintenance recommendations from the report as soon as practical. So it would be, most of those would be expected to be normal maintenance activities that Scott Hummel would and Brendan Maher would work with contractors to get addressed. So over the winter, that would be excellent work to do. I mean, a lot of them would be would be cleaning out culverts. But there may be some that we may have to look at future projects potentially if it's replacement and the structure is deficient to that degree. It could certainly require us to look at programming a project for a capital improvement.
All right, seeing no other questions then with the motion on the floor, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, the motion passes. We're going to move on to number 3, the review of the 2023 public roads, right-of-way, and park maintenance bids.
Thank you, Chair Garetano. This is a annual topic at this meeting every year, pretty much at least since I've been on board with the city of Wildwood. So we will solicit for bids from maintenance contractors for our public roads, rights of ways, and parks in October for the following year. We've done this since incorporation, and we've tried to keep our services to be done on a contractual basis by private contractors because we found that to be a cost-effective approach. So for 2023, we opened bids on October 13th, and we got 16 contractors submitting bids for the work. Most of these are all repeat contractors that we've worked with in previous years. I would point out that we do have 2 new bids of the 16. Land Care and ROM Landscaping are 2 new contractors for the city of Wildwood. And essentially, we've been notified that Gailey Contracting is not going to be working for us after the first of the year. So with that knowledge, we were hoping, and we did a little bit of work to try to get some interest from new contractors or new bidders. And so as a result, we do have a couple here with Land Care and ROM, and actually haven't worked with ROM yet, but my understanding is it's a new company. And the gentleman, we met with him the other day, and he used to work with Glenn. So he's very familiar with a lot of the work that Glenn was doing for us. So the expectation is high that he will be a good fit and will likely do a lot of work for the Department of Parks. So we have 2 new contractors that we're hoping to try for 2023. So the recommendation to the committee is to move forward with agreements with these 16 contractors for 2023. What we do at this time of year, based on the budget that's been submitted to council, is we do split out allocations of work based on our budget that's been proposed. So those allocations will be developed in contracts that will go individually or to the city council for approval, assuming that you all are agreeable and approve the recommendation this evening. So I have provided you the breakdowns. I know there's a lot of information here. I always feel bad every year when I bring this to you. There's a lot of information provided from each bidder, a lot of contract items, but Exhibit B does provide the individual contract amounts that we are recommending for each contractor if you're interested. So with that, I'll turn it over for any questions that you may have, but the recommendation is to move forward with agreements with these 16 contractors for 2023.
Great. Any questions, or would someone be interested in making a motion for moving forward with these 16 contractors? Joe Farmer, is that a Motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay, Councilmember Jackson, you're seconding? And he has a question. Go ahead.
Rick, you mentioned last time that you and I talked about the guardrail project. Is that under this or is that something?
That's correct. So, and it would be a 2022 expenditure. But that's absolutely right, that one of the contractors that we do have, that we do have a guardrail contractor that typically bids, which is Collins and Herman. And so they provide us a number of unit prices for guardrail installation for that purpose. So that's the whole intent, is to have those bids each year. So if we decide to do work, we can do it more or less on an on-call basis.
Councilmember Bertolino?
Yeah, Rick, two quick questions. Is Glenn retiring or is he just tired of working with us?
He's retiring. Yes, he is.
Okay.
Could be both, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, that was, second question is, that we also, I noticed it includes slab repair, curbs, sidewalk, but don't we have separate contracts throughout the year for those individual projects? Or does this cover all that? We don't have to come back at mid-year and say, now we have to bid the street slab repair. We have to bid the sidewalk repair.
So we have traditionally had a separate bid for asphalt resurfacing, as you know, for concrete street replacement, and that bid also has included sidewalk. So we typically will do a great deal of sidewalk work with the street replacement work. We usually look to do sidewalks that are adjacent to those street slabs in the same subdivisions, close proximity, that kind of thing. So I will say we are looking to come out with a separate bid for landscape maintenance. That's something we worked on last year, but I'd like to break out landscape maintenance as a separate bid and put that out and maybe get more competition, at least I guess encourage more competition, better bids. So I do want to split that out. I'm not opposed to doing that with other items as well. We try to get as much concrete bids in these right-of-way maintenance contracts. Sometimes they are reluctant to provide us prices because they're concerned about the uncertainty. They want more clarity in terms of the quantities and locations of the work. So we find we're better off if we put out a separate bid and provide them more detailed information in that manner. Yep.
Don't see any other questions. So again, we have a motion on the floor. And all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, that motion passes. I do have a question. It was unrelated to the motion, but with Glenn Gailey, I think that his service with the city goes as far back as I can imagine. So I hope that maybe we can do some kind of recognition for him at our December meeting or something like that, because I think he's done everything from picking up animals to doing road repairs, you name it. I mean, sound like he did a lot for the city that probably a lot wouldn't maybe want to do.
I would agree. I can certainly discuss that with Mr. Cross.
All right, then we are going to move then to number 5, since we already discussed number 4 earlier. So this is the proposed city consultant agreement with Civil Design for design of the Main Street Extension project.
Council members, this next item is a item that is included in our capital improvement budget for this year. We have some monies budgeted for the design of the Main Street Extension project, and the idea, I think you probably are familiar with the concept. So out front, we have the end of Main Street, and Crestview is immediately to the west. So the idea would be connect Main Street to the previously completed segment that's in Main Street Crossing subdivision to the west. So Crestview would be basically encompassed into Main Street, and there would be a continuous street from Taylor all the way over to Route 109. So this has been a project that's been planned for some time, and I think most of you know Crestview is actually a private street. So there is some work to be done to address that concern. But the thought was to move forward with the design, or at least a preliminary design plan for Main Street for that segment from City Hall to Atherton Road. we have gotten recent, and I think some of you know this, there's been some recent development interest for properties both on the north and the south side of Crestview from multiple developers. And as you also know, we are working on our own plan for Village Green. So essentially there's 3 developments potentially going on, and all of them at the end of the day need a improved main street that is a public street. So the goal, and Joe Vunich and I have talked about this, the goal is really to do a preliminary plan to clarify exactly how Main Street will be constructed and basically what the city's requirements are for Main Street. We'll have a better handle on the cost of it. And then the issue of the right of way is going to have to be dealt with. And that's a ticklish one for others to do. It's probably going to require the city to address that. So my thinking is that likely the city is going to have to take the lead on this project. And if these developments come to fruition, they would pay their share of their frontage to improve the road. So they would chip in, they would be assessed costs for those improvements based on their frontage. And we would receive those funds to use for construction of the project. Of course, we have some of the frontage as we're building Village Green. But the remainder of the frontage, if there's a development project, essentially would be funded by those developers. It's just that we might be taking the lead because there's too many cooks in the kitchen and we have a private road that needs to become a public street. So the goal here is to at least prepare a preliminary plan and get that accomplished so we can share that with the developer, say, here's the plan, this is what's got to get constructed, so they can factor those costs into their projects. At least that's the way I look at it. So the recommendation, since we are working with civil design, is the civil engineer working on the Village Green project, we reached out to them for a proposal to do this work. So we did receive a proposal from them. And this, again, is just to do the preliminary design of the project. And that proposal was provided to you as part of the memo. So the recommendation is to move forward with a agreement with civil design to complete the preliminary design for the Main Street Extension project for the not to exceed amount of $75,000. And if that recommendation is approved, we'll take that to City Council for final authorization. And I'll open it up for any questions.
I'm happy to make the motion because I feel like we've talked about doing this road for as long as I've been on the council. So I guess I'm happy to make the motion, but I have a small question, which is just how are we do we have a plan to kind of expedite this thing? Because we are getting a lot of interest from developers and things, and I would hate to get caught in the mix up or whatever is going to go on over there.
Councilman Farmer, in our current discussions with the developers that are approaching the city, this is part of the discussion. So as those development discussions move forward, including one that the mayor and I have this coming Friday, in fact, that is part of the discussion. So we're moving it forward as quickly as those developments move forward.
Because we're just waiting on like the easements or whatever still, right? Or did we get that all figured out?
No, there's still a few issues that have to be worked out.
Yes. Okay, so we got a motion by Councilmember Bertolino. That's a second. So yeah, thank you. So any other questions or discussion then on the motion? All right, seeing none, then all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? One abstention. Motion passes. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the proposed purchase of the MyGov software.
Council members, Chair Garitano, this next item has been something that we've discussed for some time in the department, and has been something I've been very interested in. Quite frankly, since I came on board, wanted to move forward with something of this manner, which is the purchase of a web-based software that would essentially automate our work processes in Public Works. Now, this is actually expanded from Public Works to include the departments of Parks and Planning. So it's really an effort that would affect all 3 departments. But Public Works has kind of taken the lead in this. I would say that Dan Ron has helped with this and has been part of this review. We have tried to also pull in Melanie Ripito with the Department of Planning and Parks. And Melanie said she might actually be watching on Zoom. So I don't know, Dan, you might check to see if she's there, but she is okay. So the idea is to kind of move towards the 21st century with some of our workflow with the city. We certainly have room for improvement, quite frankly. A lot of the things we do are spreadsheet based. Our permitting is still in large part paper based. It just could be more efficient. And I think everyone would agree we could be and probably should strive to be more efficient. It'll save us money. It'll make reviews faster for residents, contractors and the like. So there's any number of benefits, and I tried to write, what the goals I saw of this software, and it'll really help us track the things we do. It'll track requests from residents for work requests, whether it's filling a pothole or getting grass mowed or a tree trimmed or removed. And then when we submit those work orders to contractors, the idea is the software would be utilized to submit the work order. So instead of using email, which email is great, but it's, there's a whole different argument or discussion there maybe. Instead of using email, we would use the software application to send the work order to the contractor to respond to the tree that Mrs. Brown requested be removed, or Councilmember Edens requested be removed. So we could track it then with the contractor, make sure it's followed through on. When they finish the work, then they would mark it off their list, and then a response would be sent out so that we know the work has been completed. It would allow us to then track the fact that that tree, which we picked up through our asset management, was removed, and it will reflect as such in our data. Or if the pothole, maybe not the pothole, if the sign was ultimately fixed, it would reflect in our data, our GIS data. So we could track those assets and track their status in the future. So 3 years down the road, if that tree that we planted, say, or the sign that we install gets hit again, we would know we just replaced it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that kind of thing. So that data would be in our GIS system to track our assets as we move down, as we continue through the years. It will be used for permitting, as I think I referenced. So we issue grading permits in public works. We issue special use permits in public works. We issue zoning authorizations in the Department of Planning. Those zoning authorizations then go to St. Louis County, and they trigger building permits with St. Louis County. So the goal is to have all those permit processes also part of the software as well. So it would be automated. It would be tracked. Department heads could track it. The city administrator could track it. Someone calls in and asks where something is at. Hopefully we could find the answer pretty quickly. And we would know how fast we're responding to get things done. So as Ms. Clark likes to draw our attention to, if you can track things and you can monitor things, you can improve them. But if you really aren't tracking them and monitoring, you don't know how well you're really doing. So I'm really excited about the prospect of it. And basically we're requesting to purchase a MyGov software application. Dan and Melanie, when we started on this road probably 3 years ago, looking at 3 vendors, we've narrowed it down to 2, which Dan and Melanie worked with over the last 9 months, say, and have come with a quote from MyGov in the amount of $33,350. So essentially that's the recommendation, is to move forward with a purchase of the software with MyGov for the amount of $33,350. So I'll turn it over to you for any questions, but if the recommendation is approved, we'd like to take it to City Council for authorization.
Okay, I see a lot of hands up going up for questions here. So we'll try to do this as efficiently as we can. And I'm going to start with down this end, Councilmember Hopper, and just kind of move across since.
I just have a clarifying question. Make sure that we have it defined here. So on the bid, it has your annual subtotal is 26,472 and a one-time subtotal of 6,878. So realistically, after the first year, you're then rolling into just the ongoing budget for this is 26,472.
Is that?
That's a
correct?
good question. And I should have mentioned that this is not a one-time expenditure, unfortunately, like a lot of these software services, they are requiring essentially an annual license. So there is a recurring fee that would go with it. And I think you're right, it is about 26,472 is what they're quoting us right now.
And quick follow-up to that, is the cost a user-based cost, or is it just you have a license and unlimited user aspect to it?
So the draw with this software is it's not user-based. They quote you a price and you have unlimited users, which for us would be very desirable with the number of contractors that we have.
Okay. Last question I had too is anything with this software, I'm not super familiar with this platform, so as far as residents are concerned, what is the realized benefit to a resident on their ease of being able to do things? Like, I understand, like, on the background, things may move a little quicker and we may have better response time, but like, if I'm just going on the website to go do something, how is this affecting me? Where's that win from a resident perspective?
Well, hopefully it allows us to respond more efficiently and more quickly, and allows us to track those work orders so that we don't let them slide through the cracks, which is my fear, is that can be occurring every now and then, and we may not realize it. And that's something we need to not let happen, frankly. I think it'll make it easier. It is a web-based, it'll be on your phone, so we can use it through our phone. Frankly, I believe residents could download the app on their phone as well. Is that not right, Dan? Well, we can check on that one. I think a lot of them actually set it up that way, but I'll check on that. So it should make it easier for them to do that. Now, we have that capability with our website right now. It's fairly underutilized. In my opinion, we haven't really pushed that. It's my preference that that's what we use, frankly. But it doesn't follow through in any of these additional steps. It just, we get an email saying, there's a request, there's a tree down or a tree needs to be trimmed or whatnot at this location. Here's the name. But and then we just have to use that information and send an email and follow up with spreadsheets and things like that. So
yeah, I think that kind of alludes to a little bit of like, does it become easier for the resident then to interact with the city, right? So if it's provides any type of a format that makes it a little easier for a resident to provide a work order, provide.
if they
feedback,
use it, yes, I would expect it to be a
there's
little
always
easier.
that, but
Right. Yeah.
if it makes the back end more efficient, then it also provides a venue, or I would say motivation for as a city to start being what's the good way to say it, a little more aggressive in directing residents to that being the way that they would use their communication and piece things in. So just thank you.
Well, I can see Administrator Cross.
Thank you. Councilmember Howard, one of the things that that I built into the 2023 budget, a revamp of the city website, and also having a mobile app of the website. The website needs to change for a number of reasons, but a very important aspect would be to have people be able to do on their phones what can be done on the website, 100%. And so rather than trying to find something that would bolt onto our current software, which is that's a disaster, we would just redo it all. The beauty of this, hopefully, is that part and parcel to that project. Something like this then would be part of that mobile app, part of where then the residents could in fact go in there and see, and if the database is built right, we have GIS expertise in house. Then, but it would be on a platform that any resident could go in and hopefully be able to see, when is this tree going to get removed? When are they going to do this? When they're going to plant a new tree, et cetera. So that would be the goal the benefit to the resident would be able to go and instead of making a call to City Hall or sending an email to City Hall, would be able to go out and use the software and find it. And my goal is to have a more user-friendly platform for the website and for a mobile app that will allow these kinds of other applications to seamlessly interface with the website.
Mary, just one follow-up to that is, so does this platform, I think I'm understanding, but again, just clarifying. So this platform, does it allow for that more effective integration with, as a redesigned website would go in to sort of integrate those together to where they'll work almost in unison. So there's not as much connections in between where stuff would have to go from one place to the next. So, again, it comes back to that user experience on both ends, that it's very easy for a resident to go in and provide a comment or provide a work request that seamlessly kind of goes into that same system. And then you guys are able to always work in that, this MyGov system and see all that come through very seamlessly, provide updates, and it happens. So that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that this particular platform would allow for more of that kind of smooth integration of usability from a resident to what you guys do on a day-to-day basis. Is that correct?
Well, that's the goal. I think it's too early to tell, because we haven't even gone down the road yet with the website. But so rather the two will talk seamlessly is yet to be determined. The goal would be to make it do that.
Then Councilmember Alino?
I'm good.
Very quickly, did that bid include any kind of historical update? Or as you mentioned, a lot of our stuff is manual today. Is it the intent that you would eventually load all of the previous manual documents in, so there would be a history, or is that just, we have a new starting point once we put this system in place and documentation starts then automatic from the automatic standpoint, the automation standpoint going forward? And in a second, some secondary to that, I guess, is, did they include training of staff? And I assume they did in their proposal. Is it on there?
It's in the bid.
Okay.
Yeah, there is some effort for training. Councilmember, I'm not aware that we would be looking to go back and necessarily populate our data with prior work history and things like of that nature. I mean, the existing GIS data that we have would be utilized, obviously. That is somewhat limited to data that we have received from MSD and or St. Louis County. We have some that we have obtained ourselves, and that would certainly be usable. So GIS data, yes. But a lot of the day-to-day information probably that we do, probably not.
All right, I guess I'll ask my question since we're going down this way. Does this allow for customization, or do you have to pay extra, if you need to customize for certain processes, workflows we have in the city?
Well, let me start and then you can chime in. My understanding, talking to Melanie, and the reason I wanted Melanie potentially available is Melanie Ripito has used this application while she was at Town and Country and at City of Manchester. So she's pretty familiar with it, and she spoke very highly of it. And one of the things that she had stressed to me was it is pretty easy to modify or edit by staff, and that they train you how to do that. So that's the one beauty of it, that we don't have to contact them if we need to make a change or a subtle change in it. It's fairly user friendly. Dan, do you have anything else you want to add?
I was just asking, like, when you get the module, the package, like, if we want to change things in it, like, do we have to go back to them and say, hey, we need you to reprogram this? And then they're going to come back and say, oh, that's another $10,000. Or do we have ability in there to go and customize it ourselves without relying on them?
I think it's pretty customizable in terms of the workflows that we can edit. That I was trying to do technical difficulty here, but so I think they have some set, and we have the ability to work with.
So, what, maybe I'll ask what other questions I had, and then between you and Melanie and Rick, you can just answer. The one thing I was thinking of is, and I love the idea that you're automating this because I think it's overdue. I love the idea, and I'm sure this is going to have some kind of reporting feature, but it would really be insightful for us on council to start to see some metrics as to just how many calls or requests you get for certain things, and then trend reporting, because I think that can really provide early indicators of where maybe, all of a sudden we start seeing a surge in potholes. Does that mean that we had a bad winter? Are we going to see more things like that? Councilmember Hopper brought up a really good point, integrating with the website. And I'm sure, like the Administrator Cross said, we don't know until we get to the website. part if they'll integrate, but if you ask the vendor today if they've already worked with them or with the vendor of websites, that'll be helpful. And I would say if there's a way to be able to provide that status, because, you know, if a resident enters some kind of request, then maybe they are able to go back and check the website for the status, so they don't have to call or email you, taking you away from your work. They can get that information. It's kind of a self-service model. It's there, and many of us do it all the time. The only two more things I would mention is just where does the data reside? Does it sit, you know, here at the city? Does it sit in the cloud? And certainly, you know, the security aspects of that, so that we make sure we're covered there, because things do happen. I even saw an email today from a vendor about this, not related here to the city in the past. And then the other last thing I would just say is that, you know, with these kind of projects, in order to achieve success, I mean, you can have the best implementation, but if the staff and the folks that are going to be interacting are not change ready, so from a change management perspective, you know, that's where you're going to have successful adoption. So happy to share insights on that. I've done a thing or two in my life about these. Oh, if you have any comments about any of the items I brought up with the reporting, customization, or security.
Yeah.
Great, we'll have Melanie here.
Good evening, Chair and Council Committee members. Good to see you. Yeah, I do have a few of those answers to questions if you have a minute. As far as the customizability of the software, essentially they teach us how to create an application. And so I have historically at both Town and Country and Manchester, if we come up with a new application, I create a new application and it goes in the software. You can set up the different reviews for it, the different inspections, but you can do it all in the back end. So that was one of my favorite things about this particular software, is that there aren't any hidden fees and that their customer service is kind of amazing when it comes to helping you along the way, should you forget how to do it from when you were trained at the very beginning. So that answers that. As far as the website is concerned, the way that I have handled it at both other cities is that they have a portal, a citizen portal, and what happens is when they click on whatever link it is on the city's website, it will take you to the MyGov portal that is set up specifically for your city. So they go in the back end that way. So it can go in any website. So there's that. I don't remember if there were any other questions that hadn't been answered, but I'd be happy to answer any that you may have.
Sure, and if you don't have the answer now, or it's more than you want to cover now, you can follow up with the answer. But I think security, you know, just knowing then how this topic has come up before, what did they say about security and where does the data reside, right? Do we own the data, or are we paying them to hold the data over there? Because it is going to have resident data in there. And then the last thing was change management, which is just something more for you to consider. That's all.
As far as the data is concerned, it does reside in the cloud. It's a cloud-based software, which is great for access and also accessing out in the field. As far as owning it, we do own the data. And if we ever went to a new company, we could transfer the data over, but it does exist in the cloud. As far as security is concerned, the company specializes in government-based software, and so they have high security standards as far as that's concerned. To my knowledge, there have not been any instances in which that's been a problem.
All right, thanks, Melanie.
No problem.
Oh, do you have any question or?
I was just gonna say I'm ecstatic that we're doing this because it's long overdue. So I was happy to make the motion to do it. I was just gonna also mention, as I've implemented a few of these systems. So getting your people willing to do that and picking like a drop dead date of we are not using notepads and pencils anymore to keep track of things. And if you do, you know, we'll, I don't know, hang you by your toenails or something, whatever it is, you just got to get people moving because people have a tendency to drift back into their old habits super fast. And then the other thing is, this sounds like the portal is great. There might also be an API function in there that can get a little bit better integrated into a website so that there's some better tracking stuff. So I think it's cool. I'm happy to make the motion. I would just encourage you guys, if, make this thing work. If you need new technology and stuff like that to make it go in terms of computers or whatever, that's, I think, an appropriate thing to look at. You don't want to handicap yourself coming out of the gate.
Thanks. Councilmember Nye, you have anything? All right, Councilmember Eden. I saw a bunch of hands up before. Man.
Well, you've also asked good questions that answered some of ours, but I too was pretty excited to see this because working smarter instead of harder is the thing that everyone should strive for, but it isn't always the easiest thing to accomplish. Ms. Ribito answered part of this question, which was if there's a new, shinier, better version of software by a competitor, how easily does the information that we keep migrate? You mentioned that it can migrate and we own it, but a lot of times companies make things in proprietary formats and make things harder to be compatible in the future. So is that something that we should be worried about 5 years from now?
If I may,
Sure, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have switched software at both Town and Country and Manchester, and generally the issue isn't so much getting our information out of any of the systems. It's that if you want to upload historical data into a new system, then you tend to get charged fees for it. However, you can also just have them export all of that information into Excel spreadsheets that are searchable. Not fantastic, but searchable. So as far as getting it out, that's easy and free generally. And it's free with MyGov to get your information out of it. It's just uploading it into new software that becomes costly.
Understandable. And Chair Garitano asked a question about essentially cybersecurity, which was part of what I was concerned about. To clarify, I know that you said that this would be handling the permitting. Is this also processing the payments for the permitting? And if so, does it encrypt credit card information or bank information?
The software is designed to handle payments should you choose to use it for payments as well. I've done it in both ways in 2 different cities. We continue to use our current payment system at Manchester that we had, and at Town and Country, we went through MyGov for everything. It's compatible with the software that our finance department uses, Encode, and so it can go straight through there. But yes, everything is encrypted and everything is handled exactly as it needs to be as far as payments are processed, and the credit cards are not stored in the system. We don't even have access to the card numbers should we want it. I think we can see the last 4 digits if we need to, but otherwise we don't have access either on the back end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Clark.
You're right. I'm very excited about going forward with something like this to track. And I see this as being a help for you and Dan to do root cause analysis on problems that exist and find out where the concentration might be of problems. My question, though, is along the same lines as others with the security. And just to make sure, like I said before, that we find out if it contains any components or is a product of ZTE or Huawei, because we know that there's phone systems and there's drone systems and many things that are in our city right now that do contain any. I would just ask that we make sure it's not there.
All right, I think we've gotten all the questions there and comments. So great feedback, and I think great news to hear about this. So do we, I don't think we have a motion yet, do we?
We need a second.
So we need a second. Okay, Councilmember Edens, I saw your hand up, so we'll second that. Anything else? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
And that passed. Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, that passes. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is, Rick, is that correct here, the fall tree planting project, or, yeah, that, well, that's, or did that carry over?
That is an error, Chair Garitano. I'm not sure I saw that earlier. I think
That's
when
what I
we
thought.
added the, perhaps when we added the memo, somehow that,
Because that was the last time we covered that, yeah.
well, it was a for information item, so I'm not sure what happened there.
Oh,
I
yeah, there.
apologize.
Okay. All right, so with that then, since we did change the order of the agenda, you know, there are there's aspects of regarding the city search administrator that can fall under closed executive session, but the portion that we can talk about in the open session here is that as we've discussed previously, we are tasked by the council to proceed with the city search, city administrator search process here. So to help facilitate that, I did send out a note with a general rough draft of a timeline and some key steps, as well as some questions that we'd want to ponder over, and, you know, just to make sure that we are in full alignment as a group here. So I think we can cover those parts there. And I think they're the one part, or at least what I would like to get with regards to the city attorney would pertain to more of the process details there that I think require us to have that discussion there with the city attorney. I'm going to just first see if I did get feedback from Councilmember Clark with some questions regarding the proposed approach, but just want to see if there were any other questions from the group that you may see clarification on. Okay, seeing none, then regarding the timeline here, the timeline that was presented is a very conservative timeline, and that just factors in just the current cadence of our meetings, the holidays that are taking place. We hope that we can see a little even more aggressive from a timeline perspective here to complete the process, but just to allow ourselves the ability to work through all the different key aspects of it. I think it's key that we allow ourselves that kind of time. Otherwise, you know, like all projects, they are already failing from the start if we don't have a realistic timeline. So that is, you know, just a clarification there as far as that process there goes. Now, there are some questions here. I'm going to just pull these up that I want to just seek for any input here from the committee here. So the first question is, in the past, we have used a search firm that comes at a cost, and we do not have an updated cost. It was the last time $30,000, I believe, and we do not have that amount budgeted at this time. Now, I think that for what we got out of the search firm the last time we did this activity, we can do it ourselves. I feel that it was more of just someone who acted as a facilitator, basically posted a resume, gave them to us, we decided, they facilitated scheduling the meeting. So I think that was my thoughts. At least we should try to see. So I'd like to throw that there and say, you know, is that the sentiment of the group, that at least we try that way? Councilmember Edens, you got your hand up.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah, it was pretty rough last time. But I would also add that I think the process that we had last time, between the amount of time that we took between the interview process, a first interview, a second interview, a council meet and greet, and then a council meeting was incredibly drawn out. We in fact did lose candidates because it took so long. And I would encourage us not to do that again. And my other question I wanted to ask the group and Chair Garitano is their feeling on, I mean, it's always been a requirement that the city administrator, you know, live in the city of Wildwood. And I'm wondering if we're maybe an outlier, and that's been in conversations that I've had participating in the Missouri Municipal League. So for example, we have a city administrator living in our city for another city in St. Louis County right now. So there are other cities around us that don't require that. Certainly, we don't want
Yeah.
somebody that applied and is only available online, that lives in California, that said, yeah, but you said I didn't have to live here. So I'm not talking about remote work. I'm just talking about the applicant pool in the past was small. That was discouraging. And I'm thinking about what we can do to widen the applicant pool, because as a general statement, if you're a qualified candidate, and really think about this here. Wildwood is a lovely place to live, but would you rather work for 16 elected officials telling you what to do plus a mayor? Or would you rather go to another city and work for 8? And so we're already at a disadvantage. And so I'm just thinking about how to get a better pool.
Hold that thought there. 'Cause I
Okay,
think you're onto
sorry.
something. But before we move to that topic, any other feedback on the search firm? I think there's sentiment in that, seeing no objection there. We can jump to that one there. And I think before we do that, and I'll ask the city attorney to validate, but unfortunately, I think we're constrained because it's a charter item, right? That the city administrator be a resident of the city or be willing to move within 6 months. So I'll ask the city attorney to validate, because if that is the case, then as you know, charter would only be changed by a vote of the people. But he'll validate that for us. But yes, I think that maybe it is something we need to look at, because relocating is a burden, and it's something that a lot of other cities do not have. And like you said, there are city administrators that live in Wildwood for other cities, and it's not easy to pick up and move when it's a tight job market, and even costlier to even maybe buy a home these days. So, John, the city attorney, do you have?
It is a requirement of the charter that the city administrator must move into the city within 6 months of being hired.
So we have no flexibility then, obviously. Yeah, so that would require a vote and postponement of the process until the next election. Is anyone willing to take that one? Or noodle on that a little bit? Think about that. But right now, maybe it is something if we're not successful there, it's something that we need to look at and see, because like you mentioned, a lot of people are working in other places. All right, next item, good topic to bring up. The next item is that, I'm going to assume that this group will want to review the job description that was put out there the last time. Certainly we'll have input into reviewing the contract with consultation by the city attorney, obviously big part in helping us with that part. And then what we'll need is just updated information on compensation for this kind of role, because I think the last time, probably doesn't even factor in inflation. City administrators, that's stuff that, you might be able to get access to and pull that information from. Don't we have access to some resources?
The city engages the services of a third party, which helps us determine our ranges that we have for our 12 different strata of positions, as well as local, regional, and national trends with regards to annual increases. I used that information when I built into the budget increases for the staff for the year 2023. And also then that in our salary ranges, then the movement of those ranges, how much based on inflation and so forth going forward. So we already have a firm engaged to provide that information.
So that would be, if you don't mind, if you can help compile like that information, what we have from the last time, the description that was there, and the salary market data. I think that'll be good for us to review as a committee there. And certainly the contract will get to that point along the process. So anything else on that topic before we move on? All right, so we will, seeing that we're not going to at this time engage a search firm, we will look to advertise the position. And so I think between the city administrator today and maybe what resources are currently available, certainly municipal league, both St. Louis County and others, we can try to get that posting out there. But if there's other resources available, I'll look for that input and, certainly see if city staff has that as well. And then time frame, obviously, we've got something in that plan that was sent out. So another potential question would be, in some places or job applications, in addition to the application and interview, some places even do an assessment. So I was just curious if that's something this group wants to entertain or look at. Now we'd have to look and see who makes that stuff. An assessment, like sometimes there, for certain executive roles, there are certain simulations, like a day in the life of a type of role that may help. Just putting it out there, again, we'll see if there's any input on that. At this time, I don't think we have any budget for this at all, right? The city administrator?
The only budget would be the salary for the city administrator,
So I think
salary and benefits.
we may need to, and if I recall, we did have, when we did this a while back, we had one or two candidates. I think one came from the Chicago area. Maybe another one came from more rural Missouri, but did we cover travel and expenses like, overnight for them when they came to interview?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. So I think we might need to, if we do have that, we need to have that plugged in for that. We don't have any.
No, I mean, but like, Steve, without.
Oh, yeah, if it's within your 10,000 authorization, but we still have to have it somewhere in a budget somewhere, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts that could impact budgeting needs? Yeah, Councilmember Edens.
Is there any reason, I mean, we weren't doing this before, but a lot's happened and pandemic happened and our use of Zoom increased. Is there any reason why we can't host the first round interviews digitally?
Absolutely.
It's more convenient for the candidate, but it also saves us money, especially if they're from out of state.
I think
So that would
that is definitely a good
decrease costs.
consideration. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's definitely good for first round. Yeah, I think the travel is going to be more the finalists. Anything else that this group, before I ask that we just have a discussion and closed session pertaining to some of the items?
Are you planning on bringing everyone back in to close after closed session for miscellaneous? I do have one item for Mr.
Yeah, we do have to close, we do have to adjourn the meeting, so we would come out of closed session. Okay, so with that, City Attorney, if you could remind me under which items we'd be going into close the executive session.
Maybe sections 1, 3, and 12.
Okay, and that's of which just the code, is that the,
610-021 subsections 1, 3, and 12.
okay, good. Just want to make sure we got that. So is there a motion to go into closed session per those sections, per the section there as described? Councilmember Farmer, second by Councilmember Nine. A roll call for that?
Second,
Nine, Councilmember Nine.
Chair Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Jaxi, and Councilmember Nyhan.
Yes.
All right, so remember, no microphone, and we're gonna give Dan a chance to do his technical work here. we'll see. Is there anything on the miscellaneous? Councilmember Jaxi.
Just real quick, looking for an update. On the 6th of September, this group approved basically to move forward with the deer management contract negotiation, I thought it was, with the one organization whose name White Buffalo for 200 some odd thousand. Where are we at on that? I thought it needed to go to council, right?
Well, it is, I did provide an update to Dr. Rambo. So he was the author of the report. That right now is unfunded. It is not in the budget for 2023. And so the council is meeting right now to talk about the budget. So we would we'd have to find money for that full amount, or maybe talk to White Buffalo and see if there's a better, rate if we can't get the full amount in the budget.
So.
Yes, sure.
So I will admit to, when I read the budget documents that come to me from Steve and the staff, I put a lot of faith in them, getting everything in there, and I didn't catch it when it came through. So my question then is, what's the process? How do we get that into whichever budget line it needs to be in? And I mean, I got the impression that we had 8 people here that were all in favor of doing this. So how do we make it happen and get it funded? I don't know how the process works.
Okay, so there's a lot of issues at play here. And so it is not in the budget. It is a balanced budget. There's a time frame that White Buffalo talked about when it would be most effective to do what they do. There's been a lot of discussion about other entities that believe other than that report. This council or this committee discussed it. The next step would be it needs to go to council. Okay, it needs to be approved. What's happening with that, with deer management in total, and how are we going to pay for it? So the next step would be, quite honestly, to take it to council and have that discussion at the council level. So it is up to this committee then to get it through the mayor to then appear on a future agenda for discussion, not only in terms of where we go with deer management in the city. That is the next step. It at some point in time needs to go before council.
And I think too, the other thing would be is that, say, I don't remember the exact amount, about 200,000. Then there would have to be a motion to add that in, but then something has to come out that's 200,000.
Or for the reserve, or
that, yeah.
This is on our
If-
strategic plan and
Right, if it's a balanced budget, then either something needs to come out or find more money.
And all due respect, we looked at a report, we evaluated the options, and I got the impression that this group, we have an option that we prefer, and that's what we pushed forward to the council, or wanted to push forward to the council. And want to make it happen. What do I have to do?
I think what Steve just said right now, it has to be brought to the council. But they, if Dave, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Sidestepping into, do we have a problem?
The mayor sets the agenda, number one. You all know that. Number two, it is up to this committee, the chair or someone, to discuss it with the mayor about putting it on the agenda. That is,
And I did inform the mayor that we had this item. In fact, we have 2 items that didn't make the last budget, not last, but two items that didn't make this past council meeting because there was so much already on the agenda. So the mayor said he was going to defer to the next meeting. I don't know if that meant both or one of them, but I think that's where we need to just check with the mayor on that.
So it won't be the November meeting because the mayor won't be here. So it would not be on that agenda. I can tell you that. So the earliest it would be the December meeting.
Why does the mayor have to be here to discuss?
He sets the agenda and something like that, he would want to be present for. I'm pretty confident. So I don't think that something that important to the city that affects a whole lot of people, I think the mayor would want to make sure that he was at that particular meeting. So that's just my opinion.
Councilmember Clark.
I respectfully, I disagree. It does affect a lot of people in this city, and the more and more deer that are out there. I almost hit one on the way here. Almost every time I leave my house, I almost hit a deer. My granddaughter, who's just turned 19, hit a deer the other day and was very upset because she hasn't been driving that long. And I just so worry that somebody is really going to get hurt. This is a big problem. This isn't just once in a while it happens. Those deer are out and moving around, and every time they have one of those hunts in one of the parks, they're everywhere running out in the road. So I have to disagree. It is a big problem for many people in this city.
I don't think anybody said it wasn't a problem. You said you disagreed. Maybe you just misunderstood. I said this is a big problem. This is a huge problem. So if that didn't come across, and it's not my call. The point is it is the chair of this committee has to talk to the mayor and get it on that. Those are the only two people that should be talking.
Yep, and he's already, those two items already been conveyed over.
Well, I mean, I would like to say, I'm mad at myself for not catching that. However, I think all of us mentally checked it off because we had just had a vote to approve the funding on that. So I'm not sure the blame rests with us either. I will say I've also seen it go another way. I've sat on this council before where another council member has made a last minute motion during budget approval to move around $60,000. Granted, it was over, park canopies, but the point is it can be done from the floor as part of a motion. And so what I wanted, my direct question is, it's more than just a rant right now, is, it wasn't that long ago that the mayor asked for, what was it, $100,000 unbudgeted of landscape improvements, and we approved it. And so if those plants haven't been ordered and that contract hasn't been pushed through with the date, I think we can delay that. Councilmember, Clark suggested delay in the pickleball court. Well, I think we just found $200,000.
So, yeah. And
So that'll be a
this
motion
is-
from the floor by me.
We're not debating right here. So I
No,
think the point
it's
is,
just
point is taken.
procedurally,
Yeah.
we can do
Yeah,
more
no,
than
that's what we
just
just
put
said.
it separately on the agenda by talking to the mayor. We can also make a motion from the floor to amend the budget. It's really hard on the staff. That's a courtesy that another, in the past, no one gave the staff, and it's like, that's why I'm floating it now.
So I think right now, as I mentioned already, the mayor has awareness of the two items. We've talked about it, and we should be seeing that coming up. I don't know. I don't know when that agenda is, and because of his absence, whether or not he will do that, but I can talk with him about it. And yeah, so we'll need to figure that out. But yeah, and to keep it, I think to answer the question, yes. Okay. All right, so motion to adjourn. Councilmember Jaxie, Councilmember Farmer, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.